Our next segment is one I'm really looking forward to. It's about influence and impact, Michigan's women in Congress.
Good morning, ladies.
Good morning. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having us today. I'm Sarah Hubbard with Acuitas, a government relations firm in Lansing, and I'm delighted to be here this morning with Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So Congresswoman Slotkin was just elected for her first time last year from a district that spans everything from Ingham County to Oakland County and everything in between. But she came to us from a distinguished career in the Pentagon. We wanted to talk about leadership a little bit today.
Sure.
And so how did your time in the Pentagon prepare you for your time in Congress and inform your leadership style?
Yeah, well, and before I was at the Pentagon, I was at the CIA. So my entire career, I've worked either with or alongside the military, which is a chain of command organization, which is an organization where you put the mission first, where people's egos are secondary to what you're trying to accomplish. And I think that kind of mission-focused spirit is what I bring to Congress. It is somewhat different than the culture of Congress, that's for sure. But the good thing is there is a group of us that were elected in the freshman class, particularly veterans and former intelligence officers. There's 10 of us in the freshman class. And that's my crew. That's who I spend a lot of time with. And we purposely got offices together to remind ourselves to always put the mission and the country before the party and everything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. It's great to have that network of people. And I know, I've heard you tell some stories about culturally how things are really different in Congress. And, particularly early on, I think as an adjustment maybe, and trying to get the trains running on time, as they say with some of your colleagues. How's that going?
Well, it's improving, I would say, and I think this is the power of having 101 freshmen out of 435 members, right? 101 Democrats and Republicans all coming at this new. We walked in for orientation the week after we all won in November, and every single meeting started 30 to 40 minutes late. And anyone who's been in any organization, any business knows you cannot run an efficient organization if every single meeting is 30 to 40 minutes late. So the freshmen got pretty involved in basically demanding, particularly on the Democratic side, that things run more efficiently. We actually engaged our leaders about this. We had an election in the Democratic caucus, and the freshmen swung the election based on the candidate who said that he'd run a tight ship. And the next day after he was elected, his name is Hakeem Jeffries, our first meeting that he hosted was 30 minutes late. And we sent a delegation and said, hey, you said you were going to start things on time. And to his credit and to the credit of the leadership, they have really tightened up the schedule, which is, we're on the people's time, right? It's the people's dime. So it's definitely has improved.
That's great to hear. Leadership at that level as well as leadership on policy, they're all important and it all helps you be more successful. How do you come up? So I guess in your background, you're in more of a bureaucratic organization. Perhaps issues that you worked on came from above. Now I think the issues you're working on come more from your district and your constituents, right? So how are you prioritizing those and providing that leadership in your district and picking those issues that are important?
Yeah, well, the nice thing is if you actually engage with people in your district, they will tell you exactly what they're concerned about, right? And they will tell you at town halls, and they will tell you at coffee hours, they will tell you at public events. They'll also tell you as you're going shopping at Kroger, right? They're going to tell you.
Yes.
And the things I hear about the most tend to be still the price of healthcare, the price of prescription drugs, and infrastructure, not just our roads, but also water, right? And PFAS and lead. So those are the issues that I tend to focus on because that's what people are telling me they care about the most. We call it radical listening. It's not actually that radical. It's just making the point of listening to good ideas from the district. So my very first bill, the very first thing I co-sponsored was an idea that came, it was during the shutdown, right? The federal government shut down in the first 5 weeks I was in office. And I had a federal worker who was furloughed, who called me from Brighton, Michigan. And he said, here's something that would help. I need to borrow against my retirement plan without a tax, penalty. And it was a smart idea. And so that was the first thing that we did. So I don't think it's hard. It's just not all that common.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and on the other hand, you have this great experience in this, military-style, defense-oriented industry. You have a great committee appointment related to Homeland Security. How can you bring that experience to your policy portfolio and bring more home to Michigan?
Yeah, well, the great thing is I'm on the Armed Services Committee and the Homeland Security Committee. So in line with my background, sort of hard security. And Michigan, we don't, I know right now there's lots and lots of focus on the southern border, but we don't always get the credit we deserve on what we do here to protect the country at the northern border. So between myself and we have lots of members on great committees right now. So the Michigan delegation is poised in this really exciting way to really kind of take defense issues and homeland security issues to the next level here in Michigan. We've got 3 of us on the House Armed Services Committee. Gary Peters is on Armed Services and Homeland Security. We've got 2 appropriators. And what I want to do is focus on bringing military missions and defense contracts to Michigan in much higher numbers. And then same thing with Homeland Security. There's a lot more we can do to show off our capabilities here.
Absolutely. It's such a great idea to be able to align those things and find that area of kind of synergy of where Michigan can do more and where you have colleagues in Congress that want to help. So we certainly want to help explore that more. So, I've been really impressed with your constituent services, particularly as far as your social media presence, your newsletters to constituents, and the way you've been able to kind of explore what it's really like behind the scenes in Congress as you've been learning this new job. How did you come up with some of those ideas, and where's that, how's that resonating with your constituents?
Well, I think this is part of just never having run for office in any way, never being a politician. All of this is new to me too. So I just brought in the district, the state, to see what it's like. How do you get your office? It's a big old lottery. How do you do that? What does it mean to have a pin, right? What does this get you on the floor? What does it do and not do? Little things like finding my way through the underground tunnels on the Hill. It was what I was experiencing, so we just brought the district along with it, and people gave really positive feedback saying, I never knew what it was really like underneath, when you lift the curtain. So we just kept doing it, and I think people deserve to know what's happening. We've made our schedule public, so every single week we put out exactly what we've done so that my constituents know how I am spending my time.
Yeah, it's great. So have there been any, besides meeting starting late, any other big surprises you encountered in your first 6 months or so on the job here in Congress?
I mean, I think that it's a very entrepreneurial place, right? It's basically like 435 entrepreneurs, and everyone's representing their district, and we have very different districts, right? There are very different voices, even here in Michigan. And I think what I've been learning about is how do you make it as an entrepreneur after you've been someone in a very strict chain of command organization, right? There's no one telling you, do this today and do this tomorrow. It's all, you deciding how to spend your time. That's a huge opportunity. But then you also realize why there's some people who have been in Congress for 30 years and have kind of an easy time of it, an easy schedule, because they're choosing to kind of just float along. And I think the nice thing about this class is that we were elected with a mandate and a fire under us to do something, to get something done. And that's pretty different culturally from some folks who may have been there for a very long time.
Well, and you're in a situation where that getting something done is going to require bipartisan cooperation.
Absolutely.
It's going to require a lot of coalition building, and it's going to require more than just your colleagues from Michigan.
Yes.
Are there particular areas around the country or people that you've really connected with that you think, oh, we could work together, building those coalitions on some of your priority issues?
Yeah. Well, the nice thing is I was elected with a mandate to work across the aisle, right? The 8th district is a district that's very politically diverse, so I don't have to question what my constituents want and expect of me. They expect me to be working across the aisle. And my Republican colleagues in the Michigan delegation have been fantastic, right? I sat down with each of them. We had in-calls. People have been really welcoming and teaching me, things that how to work across the aisle, which is fantastic. You will not be surprised that the people I tend to work with across the aisle tend to be Midwesterners, right? So people from Ohio, from Iowa, from Illinois. You learn pretty quickly when you get into Congress how to sift out the show ponies from the workhorses. And unsurprisingly, some of the workhorses really tend to focus from the Midwest, Democrats and Republicans, issues like veterans issues, very bipartisan, right? Workforce development, very bipartisan. So that's where I've tended to spend my time.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we need those kinds of communications with your colleagues around the country.
Yes.
As they don't always think of Michigan first, right?
Well, I got to tell you, that's changing. I think after 2016 and now heading into 2020, I get asked about what's happening in Michigan every single day by my colleagues. I think we're a politically diverse state. We've always been a swing state. My dad was a Republican, my mom was a Democrat. And we are looked at as one of the few places where people are still, I think, willing to put person over the party. And that's rare. So Michigan's gotten a lot of attention. We've seen how many, presidential candidates have already started to cycle through. That'll continue. So from being a place that didn't get enough attention, probably in 2016, we've gotten our fair share, and it will only increase.
Absolutely. Well, our positioning here with the Great Lakes is one of our greatest natural resources,
Yes.
our proximity to Canada, your interest in homeland security feels like we have so much opportunity there as well. Have you been able to really get out there and explore, say, outside of the district, for instance?
Sure.
I mean, we've talked a little bit about Selfridge, but are there places around the state that you found like, wow, I could really do more here, or just kind of...
Sure. So a couple of things. I mean, first of all, with the Homeland Security Committee, I've gotten briefs on the Gordie Howe Bridge and how that's going to work. I'm talking with the FBI folks, the Homeland Security folks, the ATF folks, our border folks. So that stuff is outside technically of our district, but obviously fundamental to our state. Up here at Mackinac, having great conversations about the Soo and going through the Soo, and I've actually agreed tentatively to go on a freighter through the Soo, which I could not be more excited
Great.
about. Obviously, the Michigan delegation has agreed to take our congressional delegation down and look at sort of the situation on Asian carp, all outside the district. I think all of it fits into a category, though, that I am interested in developing in my time in office, which is starting to think about environmental security the way we think about homeland security. Because in Michigan, it is about the safety of our kids and the continuation of our way of life. If we pollute the Great Lakes and Asian carp take over, and we can't fish the way our fathers and grandfathers fished in the Great Lakes, that's a change to our way of life, a negative change. In Michigan, you are more likely to hand your child a glass of water that will give him or her a learning disability or an early childhood cancer than you are to be a victim of a terrorist attack. So we need to think about environmental security in a totally different way. It's not some niche issue. In Michigan, it's the most bipartisan issue we have, and we need to start being muscular about how we talk about it and think about it.
Yeah. Yeah, changing gears a little bit back to your leadership style, I guess. A lot of us like to talk about how there are more women in Congress now,
Yes.
but certainly still a lot of men in Congress. We don't have them outnumbered yet. Yet you have a woman as your Speaker of the House. So how, so you're still new to this, but do you have observations on how that might be impacting things? I know you don't have a lot to compare it to because this is your first term, but on the other hand, as a woman and a leader, how is that going, I guess, and how can you change things?
Again, it's colored by my experience of being a CIA officer, doing 3 tours in Iraq, and then being a senior official at the Pentagon. There are not a ton of women in all of those fields. So it's not something that's totally different. We are the class with the largest number of women, but let's just remember, we're still 22% of Congress.
Right.
So we still have a ways to go. And we are also the youngest class in history. We have the most school-age children. We have the first single mother. So when you have all those women, all those school-age children, it immediately pushes on the system, which was designed largely for men who tend to be a bit older, right, in their 60s maybe, with a spouse at home, taking care of the home front, kids maybe out of the house. So you can see all these working moms like, stick to a schedule, tell me when we're done voting, I need to get home, I need to get to the soccer game. That's good pressure, right? That's good working mom and working dad pressure. I think also it just creates a different sense of how we use social media. I mean, look, this class is different than even 4 years ago in terms of how we're exposing the public to what happens in Congress. I have 9-year-olds coming up to me at the movies who recognize me and who want to get a selfie with me because they've seen my commercials or they've seen me on TV. I don't remember being a 9-year-old in Michigan and knowing who my representative was. So that's, I think, a good thing. It's created a sense of transparency that I think is fundamentally different.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we're certainly looking forward to more of that, and we have many women at the state level in leadership roles
Yes.
now as well, with Governor Whitmer, Attorney General Nessel, Secretary of State Benson,
Yeah.
and others. And have you had opportunities to collaborate at the state level yet and find opportunities to kind of bridge that gap between our state and federal government?
Yeah, so it's fantastic. I really do think Michigan is we should be extremely optimistic between what we have going on in the state, what we have going on in our congressional and Senate delegations. We work all together all the time. So, for instance, on the issue of bringing more military missions and defense contracts in. So you can't do that without the state, right? Gretchen, or Governor Whitmer and Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist, are extremely pivotal to that. And one of the things where we can work together is, for instance, I have contacts at the Pentagon, and I say, how do I bring active duty missions back to Michigan, right? You're the head of the Air Force. Tell me how I do that. And the head of the Air Force said to me, it's all about the spouses. Right? If I want to get people to move to a new place and not have them leave the Air Force, they are going to want to bring their entire family. Do you have reciprocity for things like teaching certificates, right? So if a spouse is teaching in Florida, can he or she come and teach in Michigan without going through recertification? That is something that our state legislature can work on in a bipartisan fashion tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
And so that's how you kind of work hand in glove on taking us to a new level. And I think that our governor and our lieutenant governor are perfectly poised as she walks by to do that and do it in a really fantastic way.
Yeah, that was good timing.
Yeah, it was great timing.
Good morning, Governor Whitmer.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's great. And there is an interest at the state level, as I've worked on some issues about interstate medical licensure compacts, interest in interstate compacts related to nurse licensure and things. So certainly it's a great opportunity to do more of that.
Yeah. So, and it's, Michigan, as we saw this, over this conference, Michigan has a lot to teach Washington about how it is still possible to work together, right? I think a lot of the polarization and the vitriol has been imported from Washington, but Michigan was always a place where we were able to get things done, even when we had different political views. And I don't want to lose that. And I think that we need wins. We need to hit singles and make sure that we can still demonstrate to the public that Republicans and Democrats can and will work together, even if Washington can't seem to do it.
Yeah, I've been working in and around politics for a long time, and some of the biggest wins I've seen as far as helping solve intractable issues has been under bipartisan government.
That's the way that we have passed some of the most groundbreaking legislation of our country's history is on a bipartisan basis. There is no such thing as a one-country party, or one-party country, and we shouldn't be aiming for that. It doesn't make sense. We need two healthy parties with empathy, who have different views on the role of government. That is the history of our country, and that is a good, healthy tension.
So if you could look in your crystal ball and think about where you want to be in, say, 10 years, are you thinking, I'll talk a little bit more so you can think about that. Well, let's say you're still in Congress, maybe we can narrow it to that. What kinds of things would you hope to achieve in 10 years, whether it's politically or process-wise or leadership or policies you're thinking about? I mean, are there specific things you're building strategies really for the long term on?
Yeah, well, I think two things, two different pieces. One here at home with constituent services and with engaging with the public. I would love to be able to say, hopefully not in a decade, maybe in 5 years, that Congresswoman Slotkin really changed the way I think about how to interact with my representative. I never thought about it before, but now I actually access the services that my congressional representative is offering on things like veterans benefits, Social Security, tax benefits, and she's out there and present in a way that I hadn't ever really experienced. So that's on the constituent services side. 5 years from now, not a decade, I want to be able to say, with the help of our private sector, our governor's office, our delegation in Washington, that we have taken our defense industry to a totally new level. And we are now up there with the big dogs, Texas, Alabama, and getting our fair share of all those defense contracts and military missions commensurate with what we can do in this state. And that, to me, is exciting. It's jobs for a generation. It's showing off what we can do. And I think that that's a super exciting thing to work on.
Well, we've certainly seen one of the keys to success, particularly in government, is knowing what you want.
Yeah.
Starts with that. May seem obvious, but knowing what you want is critically important. And my sense is you have a pretty good idea of what you want to accomplish, so that's great. think we just have about 30 seconds left. Anything else you'd like to share with our friends and the viewing population here, or the Detroit Regional Chamber members?
Yeah, I just think, I mean, Mackinac, first of all, this is my first time actually in the conference. Last year I was
Welcome.
a candidate.
It's my 25th.
I was too cheap to actually buy a ticket, so we just came and met people in like the ice cream parlor and whatnot. So it's great to be here, and I think it's a real example that other states and other places can emulate of how industry and the government world, policymakers, journalists can come together. I think someone should make a Hollywood movie out of it, quite
Yes.
frankly, and all stuck here on
Who
the
would
island
play you,
together.
right?
No.
I don't know.
And I just think it's a fantastic thing that other states should emulate.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's a very special event,
Yeah.
and never found anyone else who does anything quite like it. So thank you so much for
problem.
being here.
Thank you.
This morning, Friday morning, we're going to start heading home soon.
That's right.
Really appreciate your participation today.
Of course. Thanks for
you.
having me.
Thank you.